Hey, y'all. On today's episode, we have our friend and executive director at Impact Recovery Center, Chad Lentscher. He shares about how he got into this field and why he wanted to help build impact with us, and shares a little bit about his experience. So tune in. Thanks. Welcome to Impacting Recovery Uncensored. I'm your host, Sarah Pritchard, and this is a podcast where we dive deep into real, uncensored truths about addiction, recovery, and everything in between. No sugarcoating and no judgment, just honest conversations that can help make an impact and lift up the solution. So let's get started. Today, I'm here with our good friend and executive director at Impact Recovery Center, Mr. Chad Lentscher. Hey.
Hey.
How's it going?
Little anxious.
Yeah?
How about you?
You know, getting the hang of this thing. Not quite there yet, but we'll
good though.
Yeah, we'll get through it together. But we've known and worked with Chad for a long time. But Chad, I would love for you to tell us kind of why you got into this field and how you got into this field of substance abuse and behavioral health.
I don't know if there's really a why. Maybe the why will be uncovered as I'm talking about this. It worked out real organically. It was very seamless. And so I'm pretty certain God orchestrated the whole thing. It wasn't my plan or my intentions to work in this field. I was living in Dallas and really struggled trying to find a place in a career, and really struggled financially, kind of finding consistent income. And part of the problem was I was always looking for jobs that had, big reward, but high risk. You may make nothing, but you may have the opportunity to make a lot of money, and it wasn't working for me.
And was this, were you sober at this point, or
Yeah.
You were? Okay.
Yeah. It seemed to get more difficult when I got sober. I think when I got sober, I started to recognize how much fear I was living in, and I really struggled with that.
Yeah.
In the workforce. And so I was just kind of bouncing around from trying different things. And then a buddy of mine who I was pretty close to started a treatment center down in South Texas. And I remember thinking he had asked some people to come work for him. And I remember thinking, I wonder why he didn't ask me. And that was about all the thought that I gave it. And then I got a phone call from my therapist, who is my therapist in treatment. And she must have called from her office phone, and she said, "Hey, Chad." I don't know if I should say her name or not. Probably not. But she said, "Hey, Chad, it's your therapist from treatment." That's not what she said. She said her name. And I said, "Oh, hey, what's going on?" We had kept in touch, so it wasn't surprising to hear from her. I just didn't know that phone number. And she said, "I'm sitting here with a friend of yours that thinks his aftercare plan is to come live with you in Dallas." And I'm like, okay. And I knew who it was. And so we had that conversation about him coming to live with me. And I think she had told me that when he mentioned that was his aftercare plan to go live with a friend, she was like,
Yeah.
And she was like, "Well, just out of curiosity, who's your friend?" He said, "Chad Lentscher." And we knew each other. And she was like, "Okay, well, maybe." And so the way it worked out, at the end of that conversation, she asked, she said, why don't you come work for us?" And I said, I don't know. I haven't really given that any thought. And the way it ended up working out is he came up and took over my lease, which did not work out well. I don't advise that to anybody, but he came up and took over my lease, and I just moved down there. We kind of traded places.
Gotcha.
But when I finally talked to my buddy about me coming down there, he's like, "It never even occurred to me that you would want to to come do this. And so it was really, I had sponsored a lot of people at this point. And so I felt very comfortable in that environment and seemed to fit in real easily.
Yeah. And so I guess let's back up a little bit so that's what got you into the field, but obviously you got sober at some point.
I did.
And
Yeah.
because I don't think,
Thank God.
yes, thank God. So what did that look like prior to, of course, getting sober and getting into this field? Just a little bit of background to give listeners an idea
Sure.
of where that came from.
So I went to treatment in 2005, and I went to a good treatment center and had a great experience. I've been giving this some thought, why so many people struggle leaving treatment. And really, at the end of the day, hopefully we find enough humility that we can start to follow direction. And sometimes I'm relying on one man's direction. And so a lot of it just depends on kind of whose tutelage you fall under.
Right.
I know you have an amazing sponsor.
Yeah.
Or mentor. And so when I landed in Dallas, I was connected with a man that spoke very spiritually, but some of the actions didn't align with the spiritual way of life. And so there was a lot of this that I didn't get.
Mm-hmm.
I understood the abstinence part, and I understood the fellowship part. And I even understood making spiritual progress. And I just I think my idea around spirituality was just be kind to people. That was kind of the extent of it. Be kind to people. I didn't really understand the asking for strength and direction, like really having faith and trusting God, in the discipline that comes with this. I was still and I stayed sober for 3 years, but I was still pretty undisciplined. Self-will run riot was still a big part of my life. Yes. Still making really silly life decisions.
Well, and I think that's what a lot of people may not realize is, or at least I didn't, when the substances are removed, there's still the person. And a lot of times there's a lot of immaturity there.
Yes.
And there needs to be some growing up because we've been in this kind of warped world for so long and quite frankly, a lot of people take care of us, when we're in active addiction, and we're just really focused on ourselves that we haven't had a chance to necessarily grow up or do the responsible things or, not just be kind, because that is a big deal. But there's a lot more that, you've said it before, learn how to do life.
Yeah. That's a great term, spiritual immaturity. And it wasn't just me. I was part of a young fellowship, and we were all, looking back, behaving a little ridiculously. And my first sponsor was kind of part of that. And I think he would admit, looking back on it, like, yeah, I was making some really silly decisions in life. And I ended up relapsing at 3 years sober, really confused, because I didn't want to give up my sobriety. There was no thought of ever giving it up. I thought I'd be sober the rest of my life. I wanted to be.
3 years is a long time.
Yeah.
That's good.
And it was really disheartening.
Yes.
I'd kind of built my identity around recovery now, and all of that felt lost to me. I was back to, what value do I have in this world? I'm just really lost. And then I met my my current sponsor today, who, if you ever hear me talk, I give a ton of credit to.
He's amazing. I've
he
been
is-
lucky enough to
He is amazing.
get to know him.
And he was not spiritually immature. Like, his actions aligned with his words. He did what he said he was going to do. He was super disciplined. And most importantly, he knew how to effectively sponsor somebody and take somebody through this work. And when we sat down, that's what he told me. Like, Chad, you're kind of lost. You think you know what you're doing, but I don't think you do. And he always said it in a way that offended me just a little bit, but not enough to upset me.
Right.
And that's what he did. He taught me how to sponsor other men effectively. And he just helped me grow up. He helped me realize the importance of the decisions I make. The decisions I make impact other people. And the words that come out of my mouth impact other people. And so he really kind of brought me into a life of awareness and mindfulness.
And so when you started at this treatment center, were you a director? Were you
No, I started at an entry-level position.
How was that to the
So
ego?
I didn't mind that. I didn't go down there with any intentions. I don't even know that I thought it was going to be a career.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it would be a cool part of my journey. This facility was down on the beach. I really enjoyed treatment. So the idea of like just participating in a day of treatment on a daily basis was going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And it was, not all the time, but it was fun. And
well, and I think that kind of shows your spiritual maturity because, as you were mentioning before, you're seeking these jobs that are like high risk, high reward, and all this stuff. And here, all of a sudden, you've had a complete transformation in the way you're thinking and approaching work.
Yeah. And so I started, this is a funny story. So I ended up going down there with a buddy of mine. And we pull up in the parking lot. It's a 10-hour drive from Dallas. So me and a buddy of mine drove down there, and we pull up in the front parking lot, and it seemed like half the staff is standing out front. And I'm like, wow, these guys are really excited to see us. And then my TJ, these people are important in my life. They should receive some credit on this thing. But TJ was my immediate supervisor, and he was out there, and he just cut right to the chase. He said, look, we've been working nonstop since we opened. We are so grateful you two are here, but we have not had a day off. So here's the deal. You guys are going to cover tomorrow. This is two people that have never worked a day in treatment. He's like, one of you is going to work the AM shift, and one of you is going to work the PM shift. And when I showed up, there was 32 residents there. And that's what happened. He worked the morning shift, and I showed up and worked that evening shift. Now, there was some executive people there. It wasn't just me there, it wasn't complete negligence. Like, hey, here's this new guy to babysit all these guys.
Right.
But as far as like the recovery team, it was just me. But it worked out fine.
And so through the years, you didn't stay in that entry level position.
No. And this is where I think sponsorship really paid off. The tools were the same. I was able to convey a message to these guys and relate to them. I think generally speaking, I was well liked and respected by both, the clients and the staff. And so I moved into a supervisor position pretty quickly. And then it just kind of continued to progress from there.
Well, and I always think about one time you mentioned you were doing a group at Impact, and you were talking about if someone is going through this spiritual program of action and they start at the, at the lowest level at McDonald's,
Yeah.
they will be operating off of principles and
Yeah.
be, you're like, they'll be the first one there. They'll be, staying late, doing the extra work, and they will get promoted to store manager before you know it. Like, that's just how it works.
Yeah.
And that just reminded me of that as you're talking about this.
Well, and I was lucky enough that my sponsor worked there. And so when I showed up, we all shared an office. We were called recovery advocates and all shared an office. And I asked him, I'm like, he was sitting at like what looked like a little sewing desk. And I'm like, where's your office? And he's like, right here. And I'm like, that's your desk? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, really? He's like, yeah, Chad, I don't care about titles or my desk or I don't worry about that stuff. And so I kind of took that attitude from the very beginning. Like, I'm going to keep my head down. I am not going to get caught up in what my title is here or where I office. And I think for the most part, I was there 10 years. I think I did a pretty good job of sticking to that.
And you met Adams during that time.
I did meet Adams. And Adams is super personable. He was likable. He was good. He was a good client. And the one thing I didn't mention last time is, these guys became so important in my life. Adams was who I sent everybody to that was coming back to this region of the country. Mm-hmm. And I had like 10 of these guys spread out across the country. I had a guy in Austin that I sent everybody to, a guy in Houston. I had somebody in Denver, and Adams was kind of my Atlanta, Alabama.
Yeah, and when you say you sent people to, so like Adams left the program and he's living life, and so you have other guys that are coming through the program that may live in the region that need help.
Like, hey, you need to connect with this guy when you get out.
Yeah.
He's certainly a good potential sponsor. He doesn't have to be your sponsor, but he'll at least get you to some good meetings and introduce you to some people that are really doing this thing.
Right.
And so those guys were vital to what we were doing.
And so then because I remember you asking Adams to do like a Zoom or something, mm-hmm. and so y'all obviously stayed in touch with you reaching out for people that need help, and he did some other stuff. And so what was the conversation when he brought up Impact to you?
I'm trying to recall. I don't want to give any misinformation.
Well, I know what he always says to me. He's like, I tell Chad, and he said, you open the doors, get it started, and I'll come check it out.
That's a big to-do.
Mm-hmm.
And so he told me he was going to do it. And then, he kept me in the loop. And every time we talked, it seemed to be going well. And then he called me one day and said, looking for somebody to fill a position, somebody to kind of take the lead of programming, and was asking about if I knew anybody. And I don't know if his intention was just to call and ask me, but that's where it led. He was like, you know what? I'm just going to throw this out there. Would you have any interest in doing this? And I said, I'd have to come see it first. And he's like, all right. And obviously, Adams, there was a plane ticket in my email like 2 minutes later.
Right.
And so I flew out, and, that wasn't an easy decision. I'm going from a pretty big, sophisticated operation that's got several locations in different states, and I have a big boy title at this point in time, to come to a really small operation out in the middle of the country.
A startup.
Yeah. And with every, even landing in Birmingham, it was like, do I really want to? And I love Birmingham, by the way. It is one of the best kept secrets.
It is.
Yeah. Birmingham's an amazing city. But you wouldn't know that just going from the airport to Odenville.
Definitely not. Definitely not.
So on that ride, you get take that Moody Odenville exit, and it's like a Waffle House and a Super 8, and you're like, where am I? And then it just gets more country, and then, our facility looks like a little barn. It's very quaint, very pretty out there. But still, pulling in, I had some trepidation, like, can I show up here every day? And then, I talked to Adams for a little bit, and he said, you want to talk to the guys? And I said, yeah, I'd love to. And I really made that decision talking to the guys. Like, one of the things I grew very tired of was trying to convince people to get well. Like, and I was usually the last line of defense. Like, 2 people have been in this guy's bedroom to get him up, and he won't go to group.
Yeah.
Somebody go get Chad. I got tired of doing that. I was also the guy when somebody wanted to leave treatment. Has he talked to Chad yet?
Yeah.
I got tired of trying to convince people to go to group and tired of convincing people to stay in treatment. Like, if you don't want to get well, then go do something else. And I knew I'd have the opportunity to do this here. When I talked to the guys, it seemed like, I think there was probably 8 of them, maybe 10. I mean, it was a good sized community, but it seemed like all of them were invested and wanted to be there. And that was really appealing to me.
Yeah.
And knowing that if there's 10 guys that want to be there, if that 11 guy comes in and doesn't want to be there and I'm in charge, he can go.
Yeah.
Well,
and also, we only take 14 in our phase 1. And so that was very different than, you mentioned your first day, there were 32 people there. So, and that obviously grew.
Yeah.
So what is it like, I guess, what do you see that's different and what really, well, I guess you came and visited and did the group and then what happened?
And then I flew back. I didn't give Adams an answer, but I knew at that point in time that I was most likely going to do it. And then I flew back and let them know and let the people I was working with know, and I had to stay a little bit, put a little more time in there. And Adams, of course, was calling me the whole time like, hey, when are you going to get down here? When are you going to get over here? Like, we really need you.
I know. And I remember when you came in town and we got like pizza or something. And then the next day, Adams was like, I'm taking him to get pizza. I'm like, you can't give him pizza twice. Like, we have to make a good impression. Surely you can give him something else to eat. But good thing you like pizza.
Yeah. And for those that don't know, me and Zoe, my dog, lived with you and Adams.
Yes.
And Trip.
Yes.
And probably ate pizza 5 days a week. Right. I mean, me and Adams definitely bonded over food. I'm like, I've met my food soulmate.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, for sure. Well, and you were such a good sport. Who just moves over here, doesn't have a place to live, moves in with us with this, I don't know how old Trip was, a few months old, and just rolling with the punches.
It worked out. I had a house to sell, and so I also had the pleasure of living in our sober living for 3 months.
Yeah.
That was exciting.
Yeah. which is no longer, we have a very different place now, but yeah. And so what was the most compelling thing to come over and be a part of building something and starting something new from your experience being in the industry for 10 years?
Yeah. I'm a big fan of Colin Cowherd, does a sports radio show. And he talks regularly about teams that need a culture guy and teams that need a scheme guy for coaching. I'd been a culture guy. And then the company I was with had given me an opportunity to kind of be a scheme guy. But I knew or felt in my heart, I knew I could create culture in a facility. But I thought giving an opportunity, we could create a really cool program. The guys would really enjoy being in treatment. Mm-hmm. You're having a spiritual experience. It should be the greatest experience of your life. And can we create an atmosphere that supports that? And I really felt like we could.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's the feedback we get. I mean, we do get a lot of people that have been to treatment once, twice,
Yeah.
10 times. And they all, every single person that walks through the doors of Impact are like, this is something I have never experienced.
Yeah.
And that is so cool.
And even the ones that, I'm sorry, even the ones that claim to hate it when they're there, at the end, they're kind of like, I really did like it.
I know,
You know?
I know. It's so true because, we do the exit surveys and stuff. And
Yeah.
And it is funny because sometimes I'm like surprised
Yeah.
with what people say, in a good way.
Yeah.
But yeah, well, and we just like are so lucky and blessed that you
Oh,
are
y'all are too sweet.
a part of the fam, not a part of the fam, the foundation of the fam.
No, I'm happy to be a part of. It
Well,
has been fun.
And you not only with the culture and everything, with of course the residents that come through, but our team.
Yes.
Our team is so special.
So let me talk about that for a minute. And I'm going to throw some people under the bus. I've thought about that doing this podcast. Like, I don't want to offend anybody, but I can't. There's some truth that I'll need to speak that's going to be offensive to people. One of my biggest gripes was people working in this industry pretending to be in recovery. And I would push to fire those people. And they're like, you can't fire somebody based on what they're doing in their personal life. Well, now that I'm in charge, if you're going to work for us, you're going to be in the middle of recovery. And if you're not, you got to go do something else. And so we do have an amazing team that everybody is on the same page. There's not a mixed message. And we're all close. If there is a disagreement, we'll come to some common ground on some things.
Right.
But we certainly don't have somebody saying this over here and somebody else saying this over here. But everybody is in the middle of a program of action.
Right. And Adam says it all the time, like, this is all connected. And so just like you're saying, like, what people are doing in their personal life is none of our business, but if it's all connected and somebody starts showing up in a way that isn't all that great, then that doesn't align with the rest of, the cohesive group. And so, but yeah, we are all super close. We all hang out all the time. I mean,
but I feel like it's absolutely my business, we get to say that.
Right.
It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Well, and I think that is definitely something that makes us so different.
Yeah.
But also our team, everybody has the common purpose and vision for what we're trying to achieve, and really just, get the message out there and get these guys going and helping other people.
Yeah.
So what does a day in the life at Impact look like?
So the men will start the day with meditation. In full transparency, I'm not there for that. I got to do that in those early years. I am not there at 6:45 a.m. when they get up and do meditation. And by design, our schedule is relatively light. We don't want these guys sitting in groups all day long. I don't think it's more beneficial. I don't think it adds to the experience. We want to have a couple, 2 or 3 really intentional, effective groups in the day, that they are not so tired of sitting there just watching the clock. Like, when is this group going to end? Let's just get through this day. And so after meditation, the guys will typically do some form of exercise. They love to play pickleball, but I think in the mornings they typically take a walk together. And then until 9:30, when they eat breakfast, they're going to make beds, clean their rooms, take showers. They'll eat breakfast. I'm sorry. 9:30 would be our first group. So they'll eat breakfast in that time also. And then we do a 12-step group at 9:30. We divide up, and everybody gets individual attention based on what step they're on. If we have people in 7 different steps, we will figure out a way to do 7 different groups. Even
Right.
if we only have 5 staff members there, we'll figure it out.
Yes.
And then a little break till 11:15, and the guys will have a group that's usually focused on spirituality or some kind of life skill, but like a real life skill, nothing goofy.
Yeah.
Something that they would really utilize. Like we've done some budgeting stuff, and then they'll eat lunch at around noon, and then at 1:15 is really our last of that type of group. And sometimes it's a clinical group led by our therapist. We do like to invite a lot of speakers in. We like to get like-minded people in the community that are coming in and telling them the same thing we are.
Yes.
It's real powerful because I think a lot of times they're like, all right, this little cult of guys here, like I get they all think the same, but what does the rest of the world think?
Right.
So it's powerful to have other people come in and sign off on everything that we're telling them. Exercise at 3:30. I think exercise is extremely important for somebody that's getting well and living a life of abstinence. We've treated our bodies poorly for so long. Let's start to give them some attention. Eat dinner and then some kind of meeting at night, either off campus or on campus. But the one thing that we hear a lot of is that we have a great balance between groups or what you would call the work in a facility, and then activity time and downtime.
Yeah. I think so. And again, just being able to enjoy the time when you are in a place that you probably weren't intentionally trying to get to, but being able to enjoy some of that time and having, like you said, the groups be super intentional and where they're actually engaged and they you can see, most of them care. So it's really neat. And so for families out there listening right now, what should they look for or watch for when they're trying to find treatment or rehab for a loved one?
If I was a family member, even if I didn't think I needed it, this is the question to ask. What kind of support am I going to get? I have seen family members completely sabotage a loved one's sobriety, recovery. The family members need a really pretty high level of education and need to understand the warning signs and what to look for and how to respond in certain situations, and really need resources in their lives when these things come up. So I would start there. Like what attention am I going to get through this process?
Right.
I think that'll answer every, really the question you have. If you're taken care of, you can be guaranteed that your loved one's being taken care of.
Yeah. And I think that is not what most families would be asking.
No.
Because they're like, hey, my child or my husband or my wife, whoever needs help.
Yeah.
How are you going to help them? Not how are you going to help me? Like let's get this person out of our life. And I'm, if I'm the family member, then I'm okay.
Yeah.
So
I think it's an appropriate question.
I agree. I love that. Well, the last thing that I really wanted to kind of ask you is what's helped you the most in your recovery with everything?
Good mentorship.
Mm-hmm.
I needed an example in my life, a powerful example. I needed somebody that, that was an example of what it looked like to trust God. I think that's where real people will only be able to get so far. We'll often talk about reason or logic will carry us so far, but when it's really time to make that leap, I need somebody to hold my hand while I do it. And I think other people do too. I speak pretty often about making decisions early in recovery that are simply based on logic. Somebody told me to write this 4th step, and I'm like, this makes perfect sense. Of course I'm going to do this. And then when it came time to, okay, I need you to reveal some secrets you've never told anyone. Well, logic said, why would I ever tell you that and change your opinion of me? That makes zero sense. I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
And then when it came time to make amends, I'll make amends to people that already know what I've done and don't think very highly of me because I want to change their opinion.
Mm-hmm.
But why would I ever go take ownership of something somebody doesn't know about that really is okay with me? Why would I ever want to change their opinion of me? And so I really needed somebody to help me understand why I need to do that stuff and hold my hand through that process. Like, faith has got to be introduced into this process at some point in time. You can't just continue to do what intellectually makes sense to you. And so I think for me, that was the biggest part of this, is to have somebody say, Chad, we're going to do this and it's going to work out just fine. Trust me.
Right.
And then when it does, I'm like, you're amazing.
Yeah.
How did you know?
Right. Yes, I love that. Excuse me. And that trickles over into what you've taught so many people, and
I hope
continue.
so.
Yeah.
I hope I've been a good steward of that message.
The best. One of
Thank
the
you.
best, if not the best. Well, is there anything else you wanted to add before we wrap up?
No, I'm excited to be doing this. I love this platform. No,
Okay.
it's awesome.
Well, you'll be back.
Okay, I look forward to it.
But thank you so much. It's been great. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in to Impacting Recovery Uncensored. I hope today's conversation has inspired you, opened your mind, maybe even your heart, and given you some hope. But remember, you're not alone. And if you found this episode helpful, share it with someone you know who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe, follow us on social, so you never miss an episode. But until next time, keep making an impact. Thanks, y'all. Bye.
Bye.